Hello boys and girls, today we're going to be talking about Reaper. Yeah, that's right, we're going to be looking at another DOSman joint. DOSman Games is constantly putting out quality products, but before we get into the full polished game, I want to look back at their first little idea for what Reaper was going to be. That's where you can see this first design art. The game was originally supposed to be medieval Hotline Miami. That's right, they were going to do a medieval Hotline Miami. The whole principle was you went through different little arenas, killing things. If they hit you, you die, but if you hit them, they die. After you kill them, you pick up a little funny soul, represented by a little blue head floating, and when you finish the level, you'd get to the end of the little section, and you'd get an upgrade that would carry over to the next level, and it would only kind of sit there for the next level. Now, I played a little bit of this game in my background. DOSman was kind enough to send me the first little idea they had. Now, that being said, not a lot of the power-ups worked for each initial stage. In fact, only about half of them did, but it was a fun little idea and concept, and I think some of the design that you see here and some of the gameplay mechanics do carry over into the finished product. You know, obviously, my little taint wagons, the first thing you're going to notice is the design. The regular game is way more smooth and pretty looking, obviously, because it's a finished product, but this game still has a lot more scope than a lot of the other projects that they had released after this game. Take, for example, the fact that this is the only DOSman game up until this point that has a difficulty selector. Most of the time, DOSman likes to put out a game at a certain difficulty and just let it run, but they wanted this to be kind of their first full-length, like 5-hour game in original scope. It was going to have different side missions, and it started to become a little bit of a developmental nightmare, one would say. You look at the fact that their publisher closed down about 2 months before this game was supposed to release. Their programmer was nowhere to be found until about 2 weeks before launch, and just everything that could go wrong imaginable was going wrong. In fact, they had so many speed bumps in the development of making this game that they were almost done with 2 other projects by the time this game actually released, which led to the fact that we're quickly able to release Flash of the Blade X and then DOSman Space Aliens in Space, what seemed to be almost record development time. If you look at the year that this game came out and the year those other games came out, it just seemed that DOSman was just shooting games into the atmosphere like I shoot semen into my own butthole. Well, you know, I can't waste my semen. I want to have more kids one day, and the only way to completely save everything is to shove it right back inside you. I learned that from Christian.
That might be the gayest thing you've ever said.
Well, you better check those locks on that chastity belt, Cortana, because this is going to be a wild ride.
Why would a hologram need to wear a chastity belt?
Dear God, woman, it's not that complicated. I'm just telling you to close your pussy lips.
Oh, no worries in that regard, Jabba the Cuck. I will never have him open for you anyways.
Fine, I've always preferred to slap my clit IRL instead of on a video game anyways. But back to the video game at hand, I do want to say that this game still holds a lot of the old regard that the original idea had. It feels very, very Hotline Miami inspired from the fact that you're running around with a weapon and every single corner you got people coming at you, and it's all about a trial and errors type system because at any moment the enemies in this game will put you down. They have the ability to knock you on your goddamn ass, and it's all about utilizing the right weapons for the right situation and saving the right type of ammo to deal with the right type of enemy. This game proves that when you meet the first boss, because you see, if you go through the first and second level just kind of using all of your magic powers like you're trying to recreate an OnlyFans bukkake session, you're going to run into a lot of issues when you run into this first boss, because you see, the way the arena is set up with this guy is you really got to kind of like goad the enemies away from the boss, and then you got to utilize the entire arena while running around and trying to actually shoot the boss, because the boss is firing off tons of projectiles. And I really like the way this first boss arena is set up because of the fact that the boss has all of these little projectiles firing at you. It really creates a sense of verticality, a sense of movement to where you don't feel like the boss has you cornered at any time. You do feel cornered by the enemies, but I feel like it adds the necessary extra challenge, which makes this an incredibly interesting first boss. But it does sit in that idea a lot like the first boss fight in Hotline Miami, where you're fighting the guy in the helmet. It feels very similar to that because that guy in the helmet is kind of a spongy son of a bitch, but it's all about the movement and how you utilize the arena to your advantage at any single moment. That's not saying that everything in this game is perfect, however. I really do like the first boss encounter, and for the most part, the bosses and the enemy design in this game are really well done. This isn't going to be your normal video that that I've made on DOS, man. This isn't me just sitting down, accepting the shaft into my mouth and saying, yeah, dude, this is a glaze session. I have to say there's a lot of issues when it comes to this game in particular. One, I think this has the weakest level design in their entire catalog thus far. I feel like it is very much an early game representation of what they had to do later, and I'm glad that even though this is the game that they were currently working on when they did the other games, I think that it just feels memorable in the regards of really cool level design. That's not saying that the atmosphere doesn't hit and a lot of the things that you're running around looking at aren't pretty, because like I've said a million times, DOS Man understands art design, and I think they are really, really good at it. It just seems to be the most boring representation of their in-house game level design. I don't love saying that. I think that there's a lot of potential to the level design they had here, and I think it goes to the direction it wants to go. It proceeds the way it should proceed. There's a lot of secrets and a lot of little nooks and crannies that you can find, but sometimes this game kind of like devolves into very feeling maze-like, which is honestly so disappointing compared to how every other DOS Man game, though it can have like maze-like areas where you can find cool secrets, it never felt maze-like. It always felt like it fed right to where you needed to go, and this, you know, just kind of didn't. It felt like it wanted to have a bigger scope, and it did a lot of things that you saw like in Flash of the Blade X, just not as streamlined as Flash of the Blade X. I think Flash of the Blade X made everything, even the big town areas, they felt like big towns. They felt like you were a part of a living world. This just feels like they made towns because they wanted to make towns. Now, again, I don't think that that's a bad thing, and I think for what they were trying to do with this game, it worked. These are just light critiques. Again, I think this is a very, very good game. I think that a lot of the weapon designs are very cool looking. My favorite are the dual akimbo floating knives thing. They are overpowered to the point to where they kind of break the game once you get them, but god damn it are they fun to use. The design, the animation, everything about these are top goddamn tier. I think they are some of the best designed weapons I've ever seen in an FPS medieval style game. Now, I have to say this is probably one of my favorite medieval style games I played. I would put this up there with a medieval, because unlike a medieval, at least this game tries to tell a story. Is it the most profound thing you've ever seen? No, not really. And I think some of the voice acting, though good, you can barely hear what they're saying. It's like they're fucking whispering to you through a muffled bag while you're jerking off in a closet. But basically, you're put on this journey by a reaper. You're set on this journey by a reaper, and you come to find out that you're actually doing a bunch of evil shit for this reaper, and you've been killing a bunch of good guys the whole time, and it tricked you. I think it's an interesting journey to get to that point, but I do like the fact that it tried to tell a story. It tried to keep you going in a certain direction, and DOS Man has always been incredibly good at that. Though their games are small in scope, I think they try to tell at least a decent story to keep the player progressing along. It doesn't feel like you're just running through a bunch of different random fucking levels, which was my problem with the medieval. Another credit I want to give is the enemy design is amazing. Do you see this fucking ogre that I'm just plowing his butt cheeks in? He looks amazing, dude. Almost every character that is designed in any DOS Man game ever is an absolute masterpiece in my opinion, and I truly think that even the AAA industry needs to take a pause and look at what DOS Man's doing with enemy variety and design. I feel like they have the balance down. I have yet to play a DOS Man game where the enemy variety and design doesn't get my dick wet and super freaking hard. But to be real, I really do think that it's incredible, and there's never a time where I'm feeling like I'm not running into a new enemy on every single level. It always seems to keep me on my toes and keep the experience fresh and fun throughout the entire playthrough. That is something, even though I did critique the level design, I think the game will always be something that I will play again someday, because the enemies are so incredibly made, and though there are downsides of this experience, I think that there's so much good here to not overlook this game. The weapon design on top of the enemy design is just as immaculate. You have a bow that shoots exploding bolts. You have a staff that shoots fireballs. The constant different styles of weapons that you run into keep the playthrough feeling incredibly fresh, just like a pussy after a good douching baby. And on top of that, I think this is one of the best examples of a DOS Man game where it doesn't feel like I'm just going into a boss room. It feels like the bosses bosses are organically placed throughout the levels, almost like they're mini bosses in a Souls-like game. I really love the way that they decided to do this. It feels like around any door or any window, or crawling underneath your bed or out of the bushes at night from your favorite stalker, you feel like at any moment you could be running into one of these guys, and it's fun and it's engaging and it keeps the playthrough moving in the right direction. It's one of those things to where, though the rooms and the boss arenas are fairly run-of-the-mill and fairly boring compared to what we've seen DOSman put out, I think that that is what keeps this thing to be one of the most fun little engaging experiences I've ran through. Not to mention that when you do get to the boss arenas, they're cool, they're covered in bones and horror, and it just has good vibes, because though they do simple stuff, again, their art design is just fucking top tier, baby. If you want to talk about stuff that makes you absolutely slap clit until you have waterfalls just flooding your entire house, this last area and last weapon are so sick. You get a new scythe, and it's one of the coolest designed scythes I've ever seen, and just endless enemies are pouring this way when you're sitting in this like hallway inspired by the heavens above, and you're fighting a giant angel at the end of this. This is your last boss little arena, but it's like an enemy rush on the way up to the boss. It's so cool, and I think that the second half of this game really understood what the rest of the DOSman catalog would be, because it does get more interesting. It's way better designed than the first half of the experience. I think the first half had a very different feel. It was really trying to stick to those roots of trying to be Hotline Miami in a medieval setting, and the second half really went back to what do we want to be as a developer, what do we want to be as a publisher, and they started to go to more of that regular DOSman experience that you're accustomed to, and that's why I wanted to glaze the art style so much. That's why I wanted to glaze the placement of the mini bosses, because I think that it has a lot of promise to what they would later release and what we are accustomed to now as DOSman fans. Because you look at this boss fight, it's one of my favorite designed boss arenas. How you run back and you're firing at this angel, it really makes me think of there's a medieval boss where you're putting on these little like dumping acid zones and you're shooting the boss and then leading him a certain direction and then running back the other way. This feels very much like that, but I think I like this a little more, and that's a lot of praise considering New Blood is like one of the best publishers on the market of FPS games right now, and DOSman's over here carving their own little niche, and I can make those comparisons, I can make those jumps, and when you're doing that, you've done something fucking right. And for their first game ever released to be making those comparisons means that DOSman is incredible. I think that they only have up to go. I look forward to every single game they release. Every time I open up my Discord and I see I get a message from DOSman that they're announcing something new, I just get rock freaking hard. But that's really all I had for you guys today. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll catch you on the next one, my beautiful idiots.